Well, another thing would be nice to have. When we reload, we're loading the data, and typically it loads extremely fast here, because Firebase is fast and my internet is fast. But of course, you might be talking to a server which is a bit slower, or maybe the users of your Vue application have a slower internet connection. So loading the data could take a while. Therefore, you might want to show a loading spinner or a loading message. And that's something we can do here as well. In our user experience component, where we are loading and displaying the data, we might only want to show this list of data if we really did load data. And we want to show a loading message instead if we are still loading data. That's something we can easily implement by adding a new data property, isLoading, for example. And let's set it to false initially. Now, whenever load experiences is triggered, right at the beginning, before we start fetching, I want to set this isLoading to true, because we're now sending a HTTP request and hence we're loading new data. And then I want to set it back to false once we're done loading. That in the end means that here, once we got our data, I want to set this isLoading back to false because we're not loading anymore, we got our data. We gotta do it here and not here at the end of the method after fetch, because keep in mind, JavaScript does not wait for fetch to finish. So the next line after fetch will execute immediately. JavaScript will not wait for that to finish. It's just the code in these then functions that will execute at a later point of time. That's why we need to reset loading here. And now we got this isLoading property which we can use. We can check if we're not loading. That's when I want to show my data. And if I am loading, I want to show my loading spinner, or in this case, if isLoading is true, I will just show a loading text at least, like this. Of course, therefore, here we can also use velse. And if we do that, you really have to watch closely because it will be super fast here, but you briefly see a loading here, right? You can see it for the fraction of a second. So that's working. We're showing a loading spinner or a loading message whilst we are waiting for the data to arrive. Now, what about not having any data or getting an error? How can we handle that?